Section B, the social field.
We're always trying to understand and explain other people's behavior. We try to associate their actions with something that we think may cause them to act the way they do.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's good.
Yeah, this is really good. I like this. Yeah.
I don't understand you at all.
Oh, yeah. I love this.
Psychologists call our tendency to try to figure each other out the attribution theory. We might attribute or associate people's behaviors with their internal characteristics, like their kindness, impatience, cruelty, or whatever. This is called the dispositional attribution. Think dispositional. We blame it on their disposition. Or we might associate their behavior with what's going on in the environment around them, the external characteristics, like their living conditions, such as a wealthy or abusive family. This is called a situational attribution. Think situational. We blame it on the situation.
For example, Harold is making a dispositional attribution. He thinks his brother Spike is being nice to him because Spike is a nice guy and a loving brother. Little does Harold know that their father is paying Spike off to keep him from pulverizing Harold.
When we're sizing up a person and trying to figure out why he does what he does, it's easy to make a fundamental attribution error. That's the tendency to underestimate the impact of the situation and overestimate the impact of a person's disposition. When we're explaining our own behavior, we often have a self-serving bias. That's when we explain our own good behaviors in terms of our good internal attributes, and we blame our bad behaviors on the environment and the external stuff.
When other people have problems or get in trouble, we tend to blame their internal characteristics. In other words, we assume they did something to cause their own misfortune. This tendency is called the just world hypothesis. Followers of the just world hypothesis believe the world is just, and therefore people get what they deserve and deserve what they get.
Mommy, my friends broke my dolly. Why did they do that, Mommy?
Well, what did you do to them?
Nothing.
Well, you deserve what you get, don't you?
There are some flaws in this logic, of course, since people who do well are not necessarily the most deserving, and people who don't do well aren't necessarily evil. It's kind of like saying that people who are abused deserve the abuse, and people who get athlete's foot deserve the affliction. If you believe that people deserve what they get, it's easy to develop stereotypes and prejudices against the less wealthy and successful groups in society. It's important to think about how you explain your and other people's actions, because the attitudes you develop about yourself and others influence the actions you take.
It's amazing how much our attitudes, beliefs, decisions, and actions are based on the influence of others. This is because of the human tendency towards conformity, which is adjusting your behavior or thinking to match up with the group you're in.
Social psychologists think that prejudices develop from in-group bias, which is a tendency to favor your own group over others.
Oh, insects. Oh, my God. You guys have some nerve showing up here today.
The Rockridge rodents are going to kick butt in the big game Friday night.
No way! The insects rule the world.
You're just a swarm of pets. Rodents rule. In-group bias can lead to scapegoating. Scapegoating is blaming some injustice on another group just because it's possible or convenient to blame them. People outside your own group are an easy outlet for anger.
Just being in a crowd can make you act differently than you would if you were by yourself.
For example, a well-trained athlete will likely perform even better in front of an audience than she would training by herself. This is called social facilitation. The idea is that the social situation facilitates or drives the behavior. But social facilitation only works well with behaviors you're already familiar with. If you try something you've never done in front of a crowd, you're liable to look like a big fool. On the other end of that spectrum is social loafing, which is the tendency of an individual in a group to exert less effort when he knows that the group will be held responsible for whatever happens, and he doesn't have to bear responsibility himself.
Hey, what are you doing, man?
Huh?
Why aren't you helping?
Oh, it's called social loafing. I know that since I'm part of the group, I'll get some credit for the work you guys do. So make sure you do a good job, okay?
Let's review. When we associate people's behavior with their internal attributes, it's called dispositional attribution. When we associate behaviors with external forces, it's called situational attribution. The tendency to overestimate the impact of a person's disposition and overestimate the impact of external forces is a fundamental attribution error. But when we blame the environment for the things we do wrong rather than taking responsibility for our own actions, that's called self-serving bias. The just world hypothesis is the belief that the world is fair and people get exactly what they deserve. In-group bias is the tendency to favor your own group over others, and scapegoating is blaming other groups for injustices, not because it is necessarily their fault, but because it is easy and convenient to blame them. Social facilitation helps us perform familiar behaviors better in front of a crowd than we would in private, and social loafing allows us to exert less effort personally when we know that the entire group we're in will be held responsible for whatever actions are taken.